The morning light crept over the city, painting the worn sidewalks in soft hues of hope and hardship. In a neighborhood that had seen both struggle and resilience, life pulsed quietly beneath the weight of history. Neighbors exchanged gentle greetings as they made their way to work, their voices a tender murmur against the backdrop of distant sirens and whispered stories of old wounds. At the heart of this community stood a small business that had become a symbol of perseverance, a warm haven where laughter and determination mingled in the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Inside the modest storefront, the owner moved with a calm assurance. He had built this place from the ground up, every brick a testament to hard work and unwavering resolve. His eyes, though kind and welcoming, held a secret fire depth that few suspected, hinting at battles fought long before the quiet days of running his community hub. As he arranged a display of local art on the walls, a young woman named Marcia entered, her steps hesitant yet filled with admiration. "Morning, Mr. Daniels," she said softly, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Your shop feels like a beacon for all of us." He returned her smile with a nod, his voice warm and steady. "Thank you, Marcia. It's a place where we all find a bit of light, no matter how dark the world outside may seem." For a brief moment, the gentle rhythm of the day was unbroken. But beneath the surface, a storm was gathering, a deep undercurrent of injustice that had been simmering for too long. In hushed conversations and sideways glances, whispers of systemic neglect and racial prejudice drifted through the community like unwelcome ghosts. It was an undercurrent that none could ignore, even as they clung to small joys and quiet triumphs. The peace shattered suddenly one fateful afternoon. A group of police officers, faces set in stern lines and eyes hardened by unyielding prejudice, stormed into the shop without warning. Their intrusion was swift and brutal. In a voice that dripped with authority and disdain, one of them barked, "Clear out now. We're taking what belongs to the state." Mr. Daniels stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched them snatch cash registers, personal mementos, and even a family photograph from a shelf. The air filled with a mix of fear and outrage, and the familiar hum of community life turned into a cacophony of shock and despair. Marcia's eyes widened in disbelief as she whispered, "Why are they doing this?" The owner's voice trembled not with fear, but with a deep seething sorrow. "This is not justice. This is humiliation." His words echoed off the walls, carrying the weight of a man who had faced many battles before. Yet beneath his composed exterior, an inner storm roiled, a mixture of shame, anger, and a desperate need to protect the dignity of his people. In the days that followed, the incident spread through the community like wildfire. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, their voices low with pain and indignation, each recounting the event with trembling resolve. "I've never seen anything like it," said Mr. Harris, a retired teacher, his eyes moist with unshed tears. They tore through his sanctuary like it was nothing. Amid the collective grief, Mr. Daniels retreated into himself. Late at night, when the world was quiet and his thoughts roamed free, he sat by the window and recalled distant memories of a life he had long hidden. In those moments, the disciplined warrior within stirred the echoes of grueling training, the camaraderie of battles fought, and the sacrifices that had defined his secret past as a Delta Force operative. It was a past that he had locked away to protect those he loved. Yet now, faced with such blatant injustice, that hidden strength pulsed beneath his calm exterior. "I can't let this stand," he murmured to the empty room, his voice firm despite the pain. "They've taken more than just money, they've stolen our dignity." His words, spoken to the silent night, were a promise to himself and to the community that he would not be broken by their actions. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the streets with the colors of resilience, Mr. Daniels met with Marcia and a few other trusted members of the community. Their conversation was quiet but charged with determination. "We need to stand together," Marcia insisted, her eyes burning with quiet fury. "This isn't just about your shop, it's about all of us. They think they can break our spirit, but we're stronger than that." Her words resonated deeply with him. In that moment, as their voices intertwined with the shared pain and hope of the community. He knew that his hidden past was not a burden but a secret reservoir of strength that could fuel the fight for justice. "You're right," he said, his tone resolute. "I may have kept my past hidden to protect you all, but now it's time to show that strength isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something that can save us." The community's response was immediate and heartfelt. People from every corner of the neighborhood began to voice their demands for accountability, their collective anger coercing into a powerful call for change. "We deserve respect," cried one man in the crowd during a small protest at the local park. "We will not be silenced," echoed another, their voices melding into a chorus that defied the forces of oppression. As the days turned into weeks, the incident remained a painful scar on the community's collective memory. Yet within that pain, seeds of transformation took root. Conversations in living rooms, discussions over meals, and quiet moments of reflection all carried the same message, that from the depths of humiliation and despair could rise a force for change. In every whispered story, in every tear shed, there was a promise that injustice would not go unchallenged. Throughout this turbulent time, Mr. Daniel's quiet strength became a beacon for all who were weary from the weight of discrimination. Though few knew the full measure of his past, every word he spoke and every action he took carried the subtle but undeniable power of a man who had once faced down danger with unwavering resolve. His presence reminded everyone that even in the darkest moments, the light of resilience and hope could shine through. And as the community began to heal, their collective spirit grew stronger. Neighbors who had once been divided by fear and suspicion now found common ground in their shared struggle. The memory of that harsh day remained a stark reminder of the prejudice that had once tried to break them, but it also fueled their determination to build a future where respect and justice reigned. In the soft twilight of another day, Mr. Daniel stood outside his shop, watching as the community slowly gathered, their faces marked by both sorrow and a budding optimism. "We will rise from this," he declared softly, more to himself than to anyone else. Yet his words carried far beyond his solitary vow. They were a promise that resonated in every heart, a promise that from the deepest wounds, true strength and unity could emerge. With that, the quiet resolve in the neighborhood deepened. Every whispered conversation and every determined look shared among the people was a step toward a brighter, fairer tomorrow, a tomorrow where no one would have to endure such injustice again, and where every act of resilience became a testament to the unbreakable spirit of a community united in the face of prejudice. Mr. Daniels sat alone in the dim light of his back office, the silence broken only by the steady ticking of an old clock. Ever since that harrowing day, a heavy burden of anger and sorrow weighed on him. Every time he closed his eyes, the echoes of the robbery returned, a cacophony of shouts, the harsh commands of the officers, and the sound of his own heart pounding in disbelief. Late at night, he would find himself whispering, "How did we let this happen? How did they think we wouldn't fight back?" His voice, soft and trembling, betrayed the turmoil that raged beneath his calm exterior. He was a man of two worlds, by day a respected business owner who gave hope to his community, by night a warrior whose past in the Delta Force was locked away behind a gentle smile and kind eyes. In the quiet moments, memories would flood back, memories of rigorous training sessions under scorching suns and bitter cold, of comrades who had fought by his side, and of missions where every decision meant life or death. One such memory emerged vividly. He remembered a training exercise where his mentor had said, "Strength isn't only measured by your ability to fight. It's measured by your courage to stand for what is right." That lesson, ingrained deep in his soul, now fueled his inner battle. During one of these sleepless nights, his longtime friend and trusted confidante, Marcia, arrived at the office unannounced. "Daniels, I've been worried about you," she said softly, her voice carrying both concern and determination. "I know the weight of what happened is crushing you, but we need to talk about what comes next." He looked up, his eyes glistening with unshed tears and hard resolve. "Marcia, I keep thinking about that day, about how they invaded our space, taking not just money, but our dignity. And I keep wondering if I can still protect these people. His tone was laced with self-doubt, and the struggle between his public and his Benson warrior sin. His health was palpable. Marcia placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You have always been our pillar, Daniels. Maybe it's time to let that strength shine, even if it means showing the world what you're truly capable of." Her words were gentle but carried the weight of conviction. He sighed, the sound heavy with inner conflict. "I fear that if I reveal too much of who I am, I might lose the trust of those I'm trying to protect. But if I do nothing, then every time someone suffers, I'll wonder if I could have made a difference." The conversation lingered in his mind long after Marcia left. Throughout the following days, Daniels wrestled with the twin forces of restraint and retribution. He observed his community closely. In quiet corners of the neighborhood, people whispered their fears and frustrations. A retired teacher confided to a group of elders, "We live under a system that sees us as less, and every day that system shouts louder than our hopes." His words resonated with Daniels, stirring memories of his own battles, both past and present. One afternoon, while arranging supplies in the back of his shop, Daniels found a familiar weight in his hand, a small, worn medallion from his Delta Force days. He traced its contours with his fingers as if seeking answers. The medallion was a silent testament to the battles he'd fought and the sacrifices he'd made. In that quiet moment, his internal dialogue grew louder. "I have fought enemies far more ruthless than Prejudice," he murmured. "Maybe it's time to let that part of me guide me once again." Later that week, a heated conversation erupted among a group of community members gathered outside the shop. Voices rose in a mix of anger and determination. "They can't keep treating us like second-class citizens," one man declared, his eyes burning with indignation. "We deserve respect and justice," added a young mother, her voice quivering with emotion as she clutched her child close. Daniel stepped forward slowly, his presence commanding attention without needing to shout. "I understand your anger," he said in a calm yet firm tone. "I share your pain, and I promise you we will not let this injustice define us." His words cut through the clamor, and for a moment, the air held a fragile hope. A skeptical voice from the back challenged him. "And what will you do, Daniels? We've seen empty promises before." The crowd fell silent, waiting for his response. He met that challenge with quiet determination. "I won't be empty. I have seen what it takes to fight back, to protect what matters. Together we can stand against this oppression. I may not have all the answers, but I promise you, our spirit is unbreakable." In the days that followed, Daniels began planning discreetly. He reached out to old acquaintances, friends from his past who still carried the discipline and skills of their shared military experiences. In hushed conversations over phone calls and late-night meetings, he learned that he was not alone in his resolve. "We are here for you," Daniels' one voice assured him. "Our skills, our training, they are at your disposal. We have all the strength you once had." Their encouragement bolstered his confidence, yet with each word, the line between his past and present blurred further. Even as plans were quietly set into motion, the weight of systemic injustice pressed in from all sides. Local news outlets began to pick up the story of the unjust raid, and social media buzzed with outrage. Yet, amid the digital storm, real people suffered. Daniels visited a nearby community center, where families gathered to discuss the incident. In a circle of shared sorrow, an elderly woman spoke with trembling passion. "We have endured this discrimination for too long. Every day our dignity is questioned." Her words echoed in the hearts of everyone present. Standing before them, Daniels felt the full force of his responsibility. "I know you feel betrayed by those who are meant to protect us," he said, his voice resonating with both pain and promise. "But we must channel this anger into strength. We must come together, not in hatred, but in the pursuit of justice and change." His speech was met with tentative nods and murmurs of agreement. The seed of hope was planted, nurtured by shared resolve. That night, as Daniels walked the quiet streets, memories of his Delta Force training flashed through his mind. In the silence he recalled the harsh lessons of discipline and honor, lessons that now seemed so urgently relevant. "Every mission I undertook was driven by the need to protect the innocent," he thought. "Perhaps this is my new mission. Not on a battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of those who have been wronged. The next morning, after a sleepless night filled with both doubts and determination, Daniels made a decision. He arranged a meeting with a few trusted community leaders in the back room of his shop. Over cups of strong coffee, they discussed ways to confront the injustice they faced. "We need to document every act of abuse," one leader stated. "We must hold those in power accountable." Another added, "But we must also show that our community is strong, that our voices cannot be silenced." As they strategized, Daniels felt that familiar duality stirring within him. His mind raced between the disciplined precision of his past and the passing warmth of his present. "I have kept my strength hidden for so long," he confessed quietly. "But now, when our dignity is at stake, I can no longer hold back." His admission was both a personal release and a declaration of intent. A plan began to take shape, not one of violent retaliation, but of resilience and peaceful defiance. They would gather evidence, document the abuses, and then present their case to the media and local government. It was a plan rooted in the belief that truth and unity could overcome systemic prejudice. In the midst of these planning sessions, Daniels had moments when he questioned if his secret past should remain hidden or if it was time to reveal the full measure of his strength. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he confided in Marcia, "Sometimes I worry that if I show the world who I truly am, they might fear me instead of respecting me." She looked at him steadily and replied, "Daniels, true strength lies in being honest about who you are. The very qualities that made you a great soldier, courage, honor, and compassion, are the same qualities that make you a beacon for us all. Don't hide them." Her words resonated deeply, easing the burden of his internal conflict. With renewed resolve, Daniels began integrating his disciplined mindset into the everyday struggles of his community. He led by example, confronting small injustices wherever they appeared, whether it was a biased comment in a local meeting or an unjust decision by an authority figure. Each time, he reminded himself and those around him that change was possible through resilience and unity. During one community meeting, after a particularly heated discussion about ongoing racial discrimination, a young man named Carlos stood up and said, "I felt powerless for so long, like my voice doesn't matter. But seeing you, Mr. Daniels, standing up for us, it gives me hope." Daniels's heart swelled with both pride and sorrow. "Carlos," he responded gently, "every voice matters. Together we are stronger than the prejudice that seeks to divide us. It is not about seeking revenge. It is about reclaiming our dignity and fighting for a future where justice prevails." That night, as the meeting dispersed and the community slowly returned to their daily routines, Daniels found a quiet moment to reflect. He sat in his office, the evidence and notes from the meeting spread before him, and allowed himself to feel the full spectrum of his emotions: grief for the injustice, anger at the oppression, and a deep, burning determination to see change come. "I have been given a second chance," he whispered to himself, "a chance to turn our pain into power." As weeks turned into months, the community's actions began to ripple outward. News reports highlighted their peaceful protests and the growing outcry against systemic racism. In quiet interviews and heartfelt speeches, Daniels and his allies spoke of unity, resilience, and the urgent need for change. Their words reached far beyond the boundaries of their small neighborhood, inspiring others to confront prejudice in their own communities. In the midst of this collective struggle, Daniels continued to wrestle with his inner demons. Every night he would revisit the memories of his past missions, a constant reminder of the sacrifices that had built his character. Yet, instead of being haunted by these memories, he began to see them as a reservoir of strength. "I have faced darkness before," he reminded himself. "Now, I face it again, not with the aim of destruction, but with the hope of healing." The tension between his disciplined past and his compassionate present finally found balance. He emerged not as a man driven solely by the desire for retribution, but as a leader who embodied both the fierce determination of a warrior and the gentle wisdom of a caretaker. His actions spoke louder than any hidden secret ever could. With each step he took, each injustice he challenged, he built a bridge between a painful history and a hopeful future. In a quiet conversation one evening with a local journalist, Daniels summed up his newfound resolve. "I used to hide my true strength out of fear," he admitted. But I've learned that real courage is not in hiding who you are. It's in standing tall, even when the odds are against you, and in fighting for what is right no matter how hard the battle. The journalist's eyes shone with admiration as she recorded his words, knowing that his story was one of many that could spark a change. As the community continued its steady march toward justice, the seeds of transformation began to sprout. The struggle against systemic prejudice was far from over, but each day brought a little more hope, a little more strength. And in the quiet determination of one man who dared to reconcile his past with his present, there lay a promise that through resilience, unity, and unwavering courage, even the deepest wounds could heal, and a brighter future could be born. In that promise, the people found solace. They learned that their voices, no matter how small, had the power to challenge injustice. And as Mr. Daniels looked out over the gathering of his neighbors, he knew that this fight, grounded in the strength of their shared humanity, was just the beginning of a long-awaited transformation. The tension in the air was almost palpable as the day's events reached their breaking point. Neighbors gathered in the open space outside the community center, voices low but determined, their collective anger simmering into a single, defiant roar. Mr. Daniels stood at the forefront, his calm demeanor belying the storm of emotion inside him. For too long, injustice had been tolerated, and now the community's last straw had been reached. A frustrated man shouted, "We've been pushed around for years. It's time they face the truth." His words echoed among the crowd, merging with the murmurs of shared pain and quiet fury. Mr. Daniels listened, his heart pounding as he recalled every moment of humiliation they had suffered. Today he knew change would no longer be delayed. He stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with an unmistakable intensity. "My friends, I understand your pain. Every insult, every act of discrimination, every injustice, it cuts deep. But today we rise together. Today we reclaim our dignity." His words, firm and resolute, sent ripples of hope through the crowd. Just then, a convoy of police vehicles rumbled into view, their presence a reminder of the oppressive system they had long endured. As officers emerged, their expressions cold and unyielding, the community fell into a tense silence. One of the officers, his tone dripping with disdain, barked, "Disperse now. You're causing trouble in our neighborhood." Mr. Daniels's eyes hardened. He had fought against countless enemies in his past, enemies whose cruelty paled in comparison to the systemic abuse he now witnessed. "I will not allow you to trample on our rights any longer," he said, his voice carrying both challenge and prize. "We demand respect, and we demand justice." The officer sneered, stepping closer. "You think you can stand up to us? You're just a shopkeeper hiding behind empty words." His words were intended to belittle, to provoke, but they only fueled the resolve burning in Daniels's heart. A murmur of discontent spread through the crowd, and a younger man, his voice trembling with both fear and determination, interjected, "Mr. Daniels, show us that strength. Let them see who you really are." In that charged moment, something shifted within him. A memory flashed, a memory of grueling training sessions under a blistering sun, of nights spent in the quiet discipline of the Delta Force, where every decision mattered and every action carried the weight of lives. The calm, gentle man who managed the community shop was now standing on the brink of revealing a hidden truth, the strength of a warrior. With a slow, deliberate motion, Daniel stepped forward and squared his shoulders. "You may see a humble man before you," he said, his voice low and steady. "But I have faced battles that tested my very soul. I have trained to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And today I stand not just as a shopkeeper, but as a guardian of justice." His words seemed to hang in the air, charged with the promise of retribution. The officer's eyes widened ever so slightly, a flicker of uncertainty passing over his hardened features. The crowd leaned in, every eye fixed on Daniels, every heart pounding in unison with his resolve. Without warning, the officer lunged forward, aiming to seize Daniels. In that split second, the man who had once taken covert actions in the shadows revealed a speed and precision that defied his unassuming appearance. With a fluid motion honed by years of disciplined training, Daniel sidestepped the assault, his arm moving in a practiced arc that disarmed the officer before he could recover. Gasps erupted from the onlookers as the officer stumbled back, shock evident in his eyes. What are you?" he stuttered, unable to mask his astonishment. Daniels's reply was calm, measured, and carried a weight of quiet authority. "I am someone who will not stand by while injustice reigns. I am someone who has learned that real strength comes from defending what is right." His words were not shouted, but they resonated powerfully among the crowd, each syllable a testament to the years of pain transformed into purpose. In that moment of confrontation, every action spoke volumes. The precise way he deflected the attack, the calm determination in his eyes, and the resolute tone of his voice all combined to shatter the preconceived image of a mere businessman. It was as if the hidden warrior had finally emerged, and the community felt an overwhelming surge of hope and empowerment. The police officer, now visibly shaken, retreated slightly, his earlier arrogance replaced by a dawning realization of the error in underestimating the man before him. You're not like the others," he mumbled, as if speaking more to himself than to Daniels. A voice from the crowd rose in support. "He's the one who's been protecting us all along." The collective cheer of the people swelled, their voices a powerful counterpoint to the oppressive force they had long endured. Daniels took a steadying breath, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his neighbors' faces lined with hardship, yet now alight with the possibility of change. "This moment," he said softly, addressing both the officers and the community, "is not about violence or revenge. It is about reclaiming our dignity and showing that our spirit is unbreakable. We have endured humiliation, but today, we turn that pain into power." The officer, his voice now softer and tinged with uncertainty, asked, "What do you want from us?" Daniels's eyes locked with his, and he replied, "I want respect. I want a future where we are treated with fairness, where our worth is not measured by the color of our skin, but by the strength of our character. I want change, a change that begins with acknowledging our shared humanity." The tension in the air began to ease, replaced by a tentative silence that carried the promise of transformation. The community, once divided by fear and oppression, now stood united in a shared resolve to challenge the injustice that had defined their lives for too long. As the officer slowly backed away, the murmurs among the crowd grew into a chorus of support. A woman stepped forward, her voice steady despite the emotion that choked her words. "We have suffered long enough. It's time for our voices to be heard." Others joined her, their words blending into a powerful declaration of hope and determination. In that moment, Daniels felt a profound shift within himself. The internal battle between his past and present, the fear of revealing his true strength, had given way to a clear understanding. His hidden power was not a secret to be kept, but a light to be shared. His journey had taught him that true courage meant embracing every part of who he was and using it to fight for justice. "Today we begin a new chapter," Daniel said, his voice resonating with conviction. "A chapter where we stand together, where our strength is not hidden, but celebrated. A chapter where our fight against prejudice becomes a beacon of hope for all who have been silenced." His words, filled with both personal triumph and communal promise, echoed long after they were spoken. The confrontation, brief yet transformative, had ignited a spark within the hearts of everyone present. As the crowd dispersed slowly, carrying with them the renewed hope of a future unburdened by systemic injustice, Daniels remained at the forefront, no longer a man defined solely by his quiet days, but as a leader whose courage had paved the way for a better tomorrow. With the weight of the moment settling in, Daniels quietly vowed that this would be the turning point of promise to himself and to his community, that they would not be broken by prejudice, but rather would rise, united in strength and guided by the enduring light of justice. The aftermath of that fateful day lingered in every whispered conversation and every tear shed by those who had gathered in its wake. Neighbors, still reeling from the confrontation, found themselves struggling to come to terms with the shock of what had transpired. In the days that followed, conversations filled the air, a blend of sorrow, anger, and cautious hope. At the local community center, a group of residents met to discuss their shared pain. I can't shake the feeling that something inside me has changed. A weary older man confessed, his voice thick with emotion. For years we lived in fear of being trampled on. But now I see that maybe our voices have power. His words were met with quiet nods and murmurs of agreement, each person silently vowing not to let that moment of defiance fade into memory. Meanwhile, whispers of change reached even the corridors of power. Some officers, once hardened by a system built on prejudice, began questioning the righteousness of their actions. In a small, cramped office at the precinct, an officer's voice broke the heavy silence. "I never thought I'd see the day when our own people would stand up like that," he said to a colleague, his tone tinged with regret. Maybe we've been wrong all along." His companion, clearly conflicted, replied, "It's hard to admit when our actions have hurt those we swore to protect. But if this incident can lead to change, then perhaps it's time we truly listen." Back at the heart of the community, the shop owner, once a quiet pillar of resilience, sat alone in his modest office. The room was filled with scattered papers, evidence of long nights spent organizing thoughts and planning next steps. His heart felt both heavy and hopeful as he recalled the day's events, the confrontation that had forced him to reveal the strength he had hidden for so long. He touched a faded photograph of his younger self in uniform, a reminder of the sacrifices he had made and the courage he had once known. "I have carried this weight for too long," he murmured softly to himself. "Now, I must let it fuel a new beginning." Later that evening, as the community gathered again, this time for a more hopeful purpose, a small group sat around a worn wooden table in the back of the shop. Voices that had been quiet for too long began to rise, each person sharing their pain and dreams for a better future. "I used to feel invisible," said a young woman with determined eyes, "but after what we've been through, I know that our struggles are not in vain. We deserve a chance to be seen for who we truly are." Her words, simple yet piercing, resonated deeply with everyone listening. The shop owner, his voice steadier than before, addressed the group with a calm intensity. "Today we stand at the edge of a new chapter. Our pain has been the catalyst for change. We will document every injustice, challenge every biased act, and hold those in power accountable. This is our moment to reclaim our dignity." His declaration was met with affirmations, a chorus of voices saying, "Yes, we can. And we will stand together." As discussions turned to practical steps, plans began to form. They talked about organizing community forums, reaching out to local media, and forming alliances with reform-minded individuals, both inside and outside the police force. "We must ensure that our message is heard loud and clear," one man insisted, his voice resolute. "Our unity is our strength, and together we can dismantle the systems that have long oppressed us." In the days that followed, the ripple effects of that pivotal confrontation became evident throughout the neighborhood. The once silent streets now hummed with conversations about justice and equality. At a neighborhood meeting held under the soft glow of a single street lamp, a middle-aged woman raised her hand and spoke with quiet conviction. "Our community has been wounded, but not defeated. We are healing, and each one of us is a part of that healing. Let us remember that every step toward change is a victory." Her words, tender yet resolute, kindled a spark of optimism in those gathered. The shop owner, whose inner journey had mirrored that of the community, felt a sense of release. In a moment of private reflection later that night, he looked into the mirror and spoke softly. "I have learned that embracing every part of who I am is not a sign of weakness, but of true strength. My past, with all its scars, has given me the power to fight for a brighter future." His voice was a quiet promise to himself, a vow to never again hide his true self for fear of judgment. The momentum for change began to manifest in unexpected ways. Local government officials, prompted by the rising tide of community action, started discussing policy reforms. In a public forum that was broadcast on local television, one official stated, "We must listen to our citizens and address the systemic issues that have long been ignored. Today we stand with our community in demanding a future free from discrimination." Although cautious, the tone of the meeting carried the promise of a new beginning. At home, in the warmth of his humble abode, the shop owner sat with his family. His daughter, a spirited teenager with bright eyes, looked up at him and asked, "Dad, will things really change now?" He reached out, taking her hand gently, and said, "Yes, my dear, change comes slowly, but it starts with us believing in our own strength. Today, we are not victims of injustice, we are the architects of our destiny." His words, filled with both wisdom and hope, reassured her that the future held promise. Throughout this period of transformation, every member of the community found themselves gradually shedding the heavy cloak of fear. The air, once thick with despair, now vibrated with the energy of possibility. The shared experiences of injustice had become the foundation upon which new alliances were built, a collective resolve to ensure that such indignities would never be repeated. One day, as the sun rose over the recovering neighborhood, the shop owner walked among his people, exchanging smiles and words of encouragement. "We have fought for every right we hold dear," he said to a neighbor. "And today, we are witnessing the beginning of a just society. Our struggle has not been in vain." His voice was clear, carrying the strength of a man who had embraced his full identity, a blend of compassionate leader and fierce protector. The community's journey was far from over, but in that moment, a sense of unity and hope prevailed. The injustice they had suffered was slowly giving way to the promise of a brighter future. In every conversation, every act of courage, and every shared smile, there was a silent acknowledgement that true empowerment was possible when people stood together. As the day faded into a peaceful night, the shop owner looked out over the quiet streets and felt an overwhelming sense of pride. The seeds of reform had been sown, and with each passing day, they would grow into a mighty tree of justice, sheltering all who sought refuge from the storm of prejudice. In his heart, he knew that while the battle against systemic injustice would be long and arduous, the light of resilience and unity would guide them toward a new dawn, a dawn where equality was not just an ideal, but a reality for every soul.